Hey guys, we are back, and right now we are going to be doing the chapter 5 of the spring feasts. This is Passover, this is the elements of the Seder, and the declarations of the 9 blessings. So this part is super important, and this is where things start to get a little bit more fun with Passover. Yeah. So we're just going to go ahead and read right from the book, and follow it out.
All right, so the first part we're going to talk about the elements of the Seder, as well as the declaration of the 9 blessings that take place during Passover. Now, the Haggadah, and this is something that you may hear about occasionally, but a Haggadah is basically meaning an instruction, or it's a telling in Hebrew, which is the manual of what that looks like going through the Passover meal itself. And this is the manual of the instructions of how to progress through that Seder, and is used to guide and to tell the story of Passover. It reveals the purpose and place for each of the ingredients that are used during that time. Now, we're going to be reading the Haggadah is a fulfillment of Exodus 13 verses 8, where it's actually talking about telling this and continuing it for future generations. So you're telling down talking to your younger sons about it, younger daughters, and it's the purpose of observing Passover in the beginning, in that first place. When it says, "And you shall tell your son in that day, saying, This is done because of what the Lord did for me when I came out of Egypt." There's a wide range as well of Haggadah, and they can all vary from place to place, from whoever writes them. They can vary in length as far as the amount of symbolism or how in depth they go into each one of those elements. But typically, they're all going to have basic structures, and the first part is actually what takes place before the meal begins. So traditionally there's 3 matzah, and whenever you have them, they're going to be covered and placed in the middle of the Passover table. So before the meal starts, the middle matzah is going to be broken in half, and the smaller piece is placed on the plate for Passover. The larger piece, though, is referred to as the afikomen, and is meaning that which comes after, is hidden during the Seder meal and eaten for dessert. And what that is symbolic of is actually Jesus dying and being placed in the grave for a period of time, but then whenever he's actually resurrected and the open grave comes out, it's something that's whenever that blessing kind of comes out there. Now, afterwards, this is commemorating as well the sacrificial lamb during that time. At this point, a game is played typically where an adult will hide the afikomen, and then the children in the house will try and find it. And traditionally, the children go and find the afikomen later in the Passover Seder. Now, at this part, the elements of each one of the Seder meals are pretty specific, but the first part is actually the roasted lamb shank. In our case, we didn't have a lamb shank, so we have a chicken bone, but it's the symbolism of it. And what it's known to is it's called the zoror, and in Hebrew that is symbolic of basically God's arm. And basically, God's the one that's going to be the one that has the force to save you and has the strength to keep you when you're weak. But the bone commemorates the lamb sacrifice that's made that evening in the ancient Hebrews fled Egypt. Zoror means arm and refers to an outstretched arm of the Lord as he saved the Jewish people from slavery. The roasted egg is the next element, and it's called the beitzah. And in Hebrew, it stands in place of one of the traditional sacrificial offerings, which would have been performed in the days of the Second Temple. Many believe this also represents that God's people remain unscathed in the heat of the fire. Symbolically, this is the Alpha and the Omega. You hear which came first, the chicken or the egg, but it's something that God says that's symbolic of the fact that I am the first and the last. And the next part is karpas, and what those are is they are bitter herbs, and they are a green vegetable, and it's typically replaced with parsley at the contemporary table. But it's a small vial of salt water sits nearby, and the karpas is dipped into it several times throughout the meal. And dipping the food was considered a luxury in ancient times, and this act symbolizes new life as we walked out of slavery into the promised land. The salt water part of that is that although salt water symbolizes the sweat and tears that were experienced during slavery in Egypt, it also signifies purification and healing. Now the maror is the bitter herb. I had the karpas switched. But the maror is the bitter herb that's placed on the table. And this is a spicy root. We typically use, horseradish or some other kind of spicy root vegetable like that. But whenever it's eaten, it brings tears to the eyes. And what this refers to is that this is the bitterness in ancient Hebrews that was experienced while they were living in Egypt. It's also a time for modern day believers to reflect on bitter enslavements within themselves. But what follows the bitterness is actually the sweet, and the haroset is what is the contrast to that bitterness. It's actually a sweet applesauce filled with chunks of apples, nuts, wine, and cinnamon. And haroset not only signifies the mortar between the bricks created by the Hebrews while in slavery, but also reflects the goodness or the sweetness of God, who is faithful to remove the bitter roots in our lives. There's a second bitter herb that's also called the shazuret, I believe that's how it's said, and it's the second bitter herb and has the same meaning as the maror previously. But the last two elements are the matzah, which are the pieces of matzah, are the three pieces that are placed on the Seder plate. But this bread is made without leaven and does not rise like traditional bread. This bread would have been made hastily, allowing the Israelites to escape quickly. And the leaven in the bread enables the dough to rise or puff up, similar to pride. The removal of leaven represents the removal of personal pride from our souls. And then lastly, the last element on the Passover table is the wine or the juice. And each individual attending the Seder is given a cup or a glass from which they drink 4 cups of wine or juice. Traditionally, these represent the 4 promises of God, such as, I will bring you out, I will rescue you, I will redeem you, and I will take you as my people.
Okay, the Passover cups. The 4 Passover cups and what they represent. The Lord used these 4 expressions of deliverance for the Hebrew people, describing their exodus out of Egypt. I will bring you out, Exodus 6:6. I will rescue you, Exodus 6:6. I will redeem you, Exodus 6:6. And I will take you as my people, Exodus 6:7. At the Passover Seder meal, each person is given a cup of wine or juice. They drink from the cup 4 times, which represents the 4 cups of wine. The wine or the juice is sipped at specific times throughout the Seder meal and represents different covenant promises. The first cup, the cup of sanctification. Blessed are you, Lord, our God, ruler of the universe, who creates the fruit of the vine. Sipping the first cup is then followed by questions and answers regarding the significance of the night and the reasons behind the traditional foods that are eaten. For believers of Yeshua, the symbolism of the night and of the foods are eaten have revelatory meaning. The questions. A few of the questions asked and the answers declared at the Passover table. Why is the night different from all other nights?
And these are typically asked by the children at the time. So what they'll do is they'll have the children will typically ask the questions, and this is something that allows adults or their parents to be able to kind of explain some of the reasons and why this night is different. Why are we doing things different? Normally we do this, but now we're doing this, and this was what the culture looked like back then. But yeah, the questions were, the first one was, why is this night different from all other nights? And the answer on that is that on all other nights we eat either leavened or we eat either leavened bread or unleavened matzah. But on this night, why do we only eat matzah? And it says, don't you know that a little yeast works throughout the whole dough? Get rid of the old yeast so that you may be as new, fresh dough as you really are, for Messiah, our Passover lamb, has been sacrificed. The next is that on all other nights we eat all kinds of vegetables. On this night, why do we eat only bitter herbs? It says, as we partake in the matzah and the bitter herbs, let us allow the bitter taste to cause us to shed tears of compassion for the sorrow that our ancestors knew thousands of years ago.
What is tasted with the first cup? The bitter herbs and the salt water are tasted at this time. They represent the pain, suffering, and tears that the Israelites endured during their time in Egypt. The herbs are immersed in the salt water, representing the life. That life will bring tears, but through Yeshua we have new life as we pass over from death to life. The second cup, the cup of the plagues. This cup symbolizes the freedom we have from fear of sickness, disease, and disaster. What is tasted in the second cup? The lamb shank and the egg are tasted at this time. The lamb shank reminds us of the Lord's strength, and the egg reminds us of his sovereignty of the Almighty God. The third cup, the cup of redemption and healing, released. A blessing is declared over the bread and the wine/juice. Blessed are you, Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who brings forth bread from the earth. Blessed are you, Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who creates the fruit of the vine. Scholars believe it was the third cup that Jesus referred to when he took the cup and gave thanks and gave it to them, the disciples, saying, drink from it, all of you, for this is my blood of the new covenant, which is shed for many for the remission of sins. Matthew 26:27-28. And this third cup is what many of us today associate with communion. When Yeshua Messiah went to the cross the day after Passover Seder, he willingly gave his life for us. His blood was shed to purchase our pardon and restore our covenant relationship with the Father. Remembering this as you taste the third cup opens your eyes and heart to how magnificent the sacrifice was at the cross. As a result, your faith in the Lord grows. What is tasted in the third cup? There is a blessing given over the wine/juice and the bread, and the matzah is tasted at this time. The fourth cup, the cup of praise. At this point in the Seder, there is a declaration of God's promises written in Exodus 23. As believers, we can proclaim these promises because God brought us out of slavery of sin and into freedom through a covenant relationship made possible by Yeshua's death and resurrection.
The cup of praise is the fourth cup of the Passover meal. And with that, there is a declaration of what is to come as you taste the fourth cup. And these are considered the 9 blessings of Passover. These are based out of Exodus 23. But the first one is for a blessing of divine protection. The second is for a blessing of position and alignment. The third is divine authority. The fourth is health and prosperity. The fifth is multiplication and longevity. The sixth is respect from your enemies. The seventh is dominion. The eighth is increase of inheritance. And the ninth is a freedom from corrupt covenants. So these 4 Passover cups are going to represent the 4 promises that can still be activated today. Jesus' death and resurrection did not negate them, it fulfilled them. Shouldn't this knowledge bring even more connection and desire to celebrate Passover?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, do we have time for the 9?
We do.
Okay.
I think so. So when we're going to talk about the 9 blessings, these are ones where within the courts of heaven, these are things that are based off of, again, Exodus 23. And they go through, 20 all the way through 30, 20 through 30. But in a lot of other ways that as we are declaring through the 4th cup of Passover, these are things that we are actually calling into remembrance within the courts of heaven. These are things that we are saying that we have actually been obedient, and the covenants that come from the blessings of Passover are one of those that are, if we have celebrated Passover and kept the Lord's commands, then we are entitled to these blessings. We are allowed these blessings, and these are something that we activate each one of them as we go. So as we do these, we do statements that we declare and decree over our family, over our life, over our businesses, over our marriage, over our children, and any of the other areas of influence within our lives that could stand to benefit from having these blessings, which they all do. But as we read these declarations that are made with the 4th cup, these are the 9 unique opportunities for blessings to be released in your life as you decree them with your feet placed beneath the Lord's table. So the first is a promise of divine protection, where we say, I decree and declare that I will have divine protection over my family and business. And the verse that associates with that, it says, Exodus 23:20, it says, Behold, I send an angel before you to keep you in the way and to bring you into the place which I have prepared. The second is for positioning and alignment that provides protection from your enemies. And we say, I decree and declare that I will be in correct alignment and at the center of the Lord's will. According to Exodus 23:22, that says, But if you indeed obey his voice and do all that I speak, then I will be an enemy to your enemies and an adversary to your adversaries. The third blessing is the commission of divine authority that says, I decree and declare that I will be commissioned this year to walk in divine authority. According to Exodus 23, verse 24, it says, You shall not bow down to their gods, nor serve them, nor do according to their works, but you shall utterly overthrow them and completely break down their sacred pillars. The fourth one is supernatural health and kingdom prosperity. where we say, I decree and declare that I will walk in kingdom health and in godly health and kingdom prosperity. And according to Exodus 23:25, it says, so you shall serve the Lord your God, and he will bless your bread and your water, and I will take sickness away from the midst of you. The next promise is a covenant protection for multiplication and longevity. I decree and declare that I am free from all satanic witchcraft, false decrees and covenants, curses, hexes, and all Baal structures that lead to the abortion of my spiritual assignments. According to Exodus 23, verse 26, that says, no one shall suffer miscarriage or be barren in your land. I will fulfill the number of your days.
So I guess in this moment, that's when we go, hello there. It works.
It does. The sixth promise is a godly release of fear and respect from your enemies, where we say, I decree and declare a release of the fear of the Lord, the beginning of wisdom within me. My enemies will have a respect for the Lord in me. They will not touch the Lord's anointed in words, actions, or deeds. And according to Exodus 23, verse 27, we say, I will send my fear before you. I will cause confusion among all the people to whom you come, and will make all your enemies turn their backs to you. The seventh one is the driving out of your enemies, where we say, I decree and declare that the warring angels in the heavenly host of Zion will be released from heaven to do spiritual warfare on my behalf. Coming from Exodus 23, verse 28, that says, and I will send hornets before you, which will drive out the Hivite, the Canaanite, and the Hittite from before you. The eighth blessing is dominion and increased inheritance, where it says, I decree and declare the release of my ability to perceive and receive my dominion and my inheritance. According to Exodus 23:30, that says, little by little I will drive them out from before you until you have increased and you inherit the land. The last is a freedom from corrupt covenants, where we say, I declare and decree that I will be free and cleansed from all false covenants and destructive relationships. According to Exodus 23:33, where they say, they shall not dwell in your land, lest they make you sin against me. For if you serve their gods, it will surely be a snare to you.
So just to kind of comment on the 9 blessings, they are incredible, and I don't know, I'm so excited to be able to observe Passover this year and get to go through all of these blessings, but just reading them make me excited, and I just see how the Lord has been faithful to these in our life, especially over the last year, as a married couple, and it's just incredible. So it's wonderful that these things are accessible to us.
Yeah,
These
if
are
you
our
want them
covenant
yourself,
rights.
here you go.
Yeah, so
This is what it takes.
exactly. And then scriptures to meditate on. Do you think that I came to destroy the law Do you think that I came to destroy the law or the prophets? I did not come to destroy, but to fulfill. For assuredly I say to you, till heaven and earth pass away, one jot or one tittle will by no means pass from the law till all is fulfilled. Matthew 5:17-18. For as often as you eat this bread and drink this cup, you proclaim the Lord's death till he comes. 1 Corinthians 11:26. And he took the bread and gave thanks and broke it and gave it to them, saying, this is my body which is given for you. Do this in remembrance of me. Likewise, he also took the cup after supper, saying, this cup is the new covenant in my blood, which is shed for you. Luke 22:19-20. We will also put those up on the screen as well.
Now, all of these, the last few questions that we have of this session here is, the first one is, how does knowing the meaning of the Seder elements give you a deeper understanding of God's faithfulness and Jesus' sacrifice? For me, it's something that it allows you to really experience it in all of your senses together. Whenever you see the plate in front of you, whenever you feel the elements that are within your hands, whenever you taste the bitterness and actually taste the saltiness and the feelings of that part of it, it makes it to where it's a whole new element instead of just hearing about it from your ears and never actually experiencing it yourself. The thing that we see it is that it's a full encounter, and Passover is an encounter. And whenever you are actually able to experience what God has for you in that setting, you have the opportunities to really take your spiritual basically your spiritual relationship with God to a complete different level, because you see what he worked through ever since the beginning of time. Whenever he has constantly had good things for you and had your redemption built for you. He has that plan for you, that spouse for you. He has these places, areas in your life, things that you don't see your way out of, but he's already developed his ways out of them. And the thing is that he's got those alignments and those paths that if you come into agreement with them, you have the opportunities to come into that place. And Passover is a great way for me to be able to see that in my own life.
Absolutely.
The next question is, there's a theme during Passover to tell the children, or future generations, of God's goodness. How can you use these Passover elements to leave a legacy and tell your children of God's goodness? How are you going to do that?
Well, one is making sure they're always at the Passover table, right?
If you make it normal, they don't know that anything's different.
And they look forward to it.
Yeah.
So how can you use these Passover elements to leave a legacy and tell your children of God's goodness? I think that it's really good that, to have discussions with them about, what the elements mean and what God's done for you. You can share with them that, or maybe even point out some things that God did for them, or have them kind of think about things that God's done for them, and then kind of relate it back to the elements. But there's a lot of different ways that you can bring them into that and make them a part of that.
Yeah, and that's something that they experience at the same time you do.
Right.
It's not, even though these elements are something that are really impactful for us as adults, whenever it's something that you have that bitterness, we give the girls the horseradish too. It's on their matzah just as much as it is on ours. And whenever they actually experience that and they understand that bitterness and things like that and the hard times come, but then there's always the harosith that follows up, which is overcoming the bitterness. And the thing is that it only takes a little sweetness to overcome the bitterness and the things like that can happen from this life. And whenever they think about those promises, it's something that helps them to remember and recall that even though things are hard sometimes, Jesus is what saved me. Jesus is what's kind of helped me through these hard times in the past.
Absolutely.
And I think that's a part where they get to hold and experience those things in God in a different way as well.
What element is the most intriguing to you? How is the Spirit speaking to you about it? I like the harosith.
Yeah.
Because it's sweet.
Yeah, it's delicious.
And I actually also love the horseradish too.
Yeah.
But it's just because I think it tastes good. But no. For me, I definitely went through my own Egypt, and God delivered me from it. So I definitely, when I was in that time where it was kind of like, it was a little do or die. Kind of like either you're going to choose this other path or you're going to be devoured where you're at. And I remember reading in the Old Testament, going back and reading Exodus and Leviticus, and when I first started reading the Bible, and I drew so much strength and so much inspiration from that story of them being delivered from Egypt and from the slavery and from their bondage, and how good God was to them and how supernaturally he led them out. Because where I was sitting, I needed a supernatural thing to happen, because there was nothing natural that was going to get me out of where I was at. And so for me, Passover is very important, and I view it on a very personal level. And so when I eat the bitter herbs, I think of my journey. I think of what God brought me out of literally like only 5 years ago, and then where he's brought me to now. I mean, in reality, it's a long time, but it's also a short period of time if you see how much God's transformed you, transformed your life, transformed people around you.
Right.
Or if you were in a really bad situation and God's just restored your joy, he's restored your finances, he's restored your body, he's restored your mind, he's restored your spirit. And so everything in the Passover table is very, very important to me. But I definitely, the bitter herbs and then the sweetness, because it's the goodness of God that comes after, is really, really big. So
yeah, for me, it's the matzah. It really is. Whenever you actually see what that looks like, because if you look at matzah that's been prepared, it has holes, it has stripes, and they're representing the holes and the stripes and that Jesus bore on the cross. It's something that whenever you have that that taking his communion, and we actually keep our Passover matzah all throughout the year, and we take it as our communion. And it's each time that we do that, it's a remembrance of what that sacrifice took for me to have the freedoms that I have today.
Absolutely.
And there's a power in knowing that bread and that body had to go through so much. But even from the times of the elements of something simple as bread, with something that only has 2 ingredients, just flour and olive oil, it's something that even in that little bit that's there, God already has a story of redemption built throughout it. And it's something that's what he was using as a symbolism through the Israelite people to actually realize that he had saved them and that he has good things planned for them. And I think it's one of those. I also think the lamb shank, the arm bone, is something that's very similar. Whenever you see the actual lamb, the actual shank of an arm, that's roasted in that way, it's something that you see the power, the strength of what that bone has. You get to feel it in your hand, and it's something that you actually see and experience that durability that's there. And it's something that whenever you're in that moment where you can't understand what's going on, God's arm is always there to be able to pull you out.
Absolutely.
And especially if you find yourself in a couple pits, like similar to where I've had in my own life, having that ladder, that arm, and be able to kind of come down and reach out and pull you out at that point really reminds you of how good God is, and how little we actually deserve any of the mercy and grace that comes to us, but is freely given. So the last question is, has the Spirit revealed to you what areas are causing hindrances in your life? If so, ask him to do that now, so as you read and decree the 9 blessings. So we have, we kind of get out of the practice of it, but these are the 9 blessings that we're supposed to recite over our lives, over our families and businesses every day. And it's something that the church really, the House of David really talks about, that being able to declare these blessings over your life every single day is something that puts God into remembrance, it puts you into remembrance, and God actually enjoys that whenever it's something that his people remember the promises that he said they would have. And it's something that you do this every day. You are reminding that the spiritual forces that come against you can't overpower you, because all throughout Exodus 23, God is just completely dominating the enemy in front of you, for you, and without having you to, while you're pulled up underneath the Lord's table, he's dealing with your enemies that he has for, that have come against you. And I think it's something that whenever we're decreeing these blessings, we have that opportunity to remember that literally every time.
Absolutely. I completely agree.
So we just want to thank you guys again. This is coming to the end of this chapter, and we're, like I said, we're trying to get these out before Passover, so this will be up here soon. If you'd like to be able to follow along with any of the Passover Seder, any of the elements, things like that, for your own, we're going to go ahead and leave a link to where you can find that tonight. It'll be on there as Wednesday is the 5th, and it'll be at 7 o'clock tonight through House of David. So if it's something that you look on YouTube or Facebook, you'll be able to find those archived there for you. So we hope you guys join this. We hope you guys are enjoying this part of it. We're looking forward into getting into the counting of the Omer next, as well as Shavuot, which is our all of our life changes, especially these last 4 years or so, have been completely revolved around that feast, and we have a lot of personal experience to be able to tell you about what happens there, what that actually looks like lived out, and we are really excited for that video. So we hope you guys stick around, share this, send this to people, comment below if it's something that you have any questions about, any of the elements, want us to talk about anything else, we'd be more than happy to. So
we love you guys. We thank you so much. We pray you are blessed, and we will talk to you soon. Bye.